Hi everyone. I just want to say that I love all of the love and support that you guys have been showing on all of the videos. Every single one of them. It's been absolutely spectacular. The comments, the likes, the views, the subscribers, everything that we've gotten here in the past week has been phenomenal. Something that I didn't even know was going to occur. And I have to say, it makes me unbelievably happy to actually be able to witness the enjoyment that people are getting from this, from what I'm doing. And I really appreciate it more than anything, to be honest. And this most recent video, it was like, it blew my mind, to be honest. It's like I just woke up and it was like, oh, 1,000 views. And then that 1,000 slowly went to 6,000. And it was very eye-opening, and it made me feel like I finally reached this point of, I kind of know what I'm doing. Like this sense of purpose a little bit. I finally found my niche, and to be honest, the only reason why I'm able to do this and feel the way that I feel right now in this moment in time is because of you guys. So I love all of you and keep it up. I appreciate every single one of you. And I appreciate all of the people that allowed me and gave me permission to read these stories throughout and narrate them. Big thanks goes out to every single one of you. Okay, the title seems odd, but hear me out. I was in the shower around 11 p.m. when suddenly I heard giggling. I thought nothing of it, thought it was my sister. I then got this odd feeling, like I was being watched, like I wasn't alone. My mistake was speaking to whatever was there. I was already creeped out, so I asked, "Is anyone there? If so, give me a sign." The lights went out. By then, I fully believed I wasn't alone. The lights turned back on. I then asked, "Were you once a part of this world?" Leave the lights on for yes. Turn them off for no. The lights go off again. Just a little note. I was raised a Christian, but I didn't really believe in any God until this time. I asked, "Are you the devil?" The lights went out. And after about 5 minutes of the lights not kicking back on, I rushed out of the shower, closing the door behind me. I realized I forgot jewelry in the bathroom, so I went back in. What horrified me was seeing handprints on my steamed up mirror, but they didn't look human. After this encounter with the devil, odd things have been happening. The lights will flicker oddly, doors will open and close on their own. I will wake up with bruises and scratch marks. I do have a cat, but I sleep with my door closed and there's no possible way she can open it. I struggle to open it myself sometimes. I don't know what to do. I think my house is cursed, but I have no way of proving it. So, last night, I had gone out to my front yard to let my dog out so he can do his business. To preface, he's not the type of dog that'll chase after anything really. He's pretty calm and just kind of vibes when he sees any squirrels or animals and doesn't pay much attention to them. He's more preoccupied sniffing around and doing his thing. My driveway is sort of long, the typical countryside driveway, so he suddenly, out of nowhere, just takes off down the driveway towards the road. And naturally, I take off after him. I cut on the light and my phone, and I was running after him. I kept calling him, but he wouldn't listen. He's never been the type of dog to not listen when I call him, even if he is distracted. After running halfway down the driveway, we're in the pitch black, and I finally see him coming up out of the edge of my light. Like I said, he's a pretty calm dog and rarely growls, but he was full on growling like he was about to kill something. He was about 20, 30 feet in front of me, and about 15 to 20 feet ahead of him was a set of red, orange glowing eyes, about twice as tall as he is, so about 5 foot off the ground. And as soon as I see them, this scream that sounded sort of human but unnatural as hell comes from this thing, and I immediately took off back towards the house with my dog. Almost beat him back to the house. The entire time, I had this sickening gut feeling like I was going to die. Not too long afterward, I was in the kitchen trying to calm down this very quick, sharp knock, around 3 to 4 successive knocks, come from my side door that faces the driveway. After that, I didn't experience anything else. So, since I was little, I've always been very curious about the paranormal and also obsessed with the story my mother told me about one of her experiences at her old job. Until 2 years ago, I had never had any experience, but the activity has increased. My first ever experience was in the middle of a class where I felt someone touch me on the back several times, but it couldn't be any of the classmates because I was in the back. From that day on, I have had several things happen to me in my house. I have heard very uncommon names in the country where I'm from. There have been objects thrown. I feel like I'm being watched and stuff like that. But there are 4 occasions that I can't forget. Number 1, I've seen this old lady from my bathroom to my parents' room. I've actually talked with my parents and uncles and aunts about this, and my aunt told me that it fit the description of my great-grandmother. Another, I heard a male screaming, "Get out," when I was gonna go back to sleep. So, everyone knows the shadow man and stuff. I saw a tall, skinny man, completely white, almost like he was made of light. He was just standing on my doorway, looking at me. I didn't feel safe at all. And this is the last occurrence. This one happened pretty recently. So, I think about 5 days ago, I asked my mom about the place in which she had experienced. I talked about it in the start because I always had an image come into my mind when I thought about it. I was basically asking her, was there a large dark table made out of wood? And she looked kind of surprised and just confirmed everything I had asked. I never saw a photo of the place, so I was just kind of in shock. I just want to know if anybody else has had this type of experience. For almost 10 years, I and a few other people in my family have had very extreme paranormal incidents and encounters that it's too long to get into now. A lot of it is tied into a house that is demonically possessed, and possibly a deceased family member who was emotionally disturbed and dabbled too much into the occult. But last night, I had a very intense dream and in it, this feminine, demonic creature thing was over my grandfather in his sleep. I went to go fight, and it screamed at me like a banshee, and I backed away for a second right before I woke up. This thing, like I said, felt very feminine, but to describe how it looked almost like if a large, roughly human-sized sheet of leather became sentient and started floating and moving and flying. It didn't have a solid discernible form exactly either. It literally almost looked like a flying leather monster. It was so black, roughly around where its head might have been, that it was more black than black, if that makes any sense. But besides that, like I said, it just sort of looked like a flying leather monster. Plus, the horrible, threatening scream. I have had other encounters in my sleep with evil paranormal entities at this point, and it is pretty much all connected to a certain house and a possible dead family member. But I am just wondering what the hell that was. Was it actually a banshee? There's also a wolf that has been stalking around the house for a few months now that attacked our dog, and the dog passed away a few hours later, even though he didn't exactly appear to be injured or have any scratches on him. Now, the house is in CT, but it is in the north, where it is very densely forested, so it is extremely uncommon but not unfathomable that a rouge wolf ended up there. I personally saw a mountain lion once there, and there are a fair share of black bears in the area, but I don't know. Does anyone know what that might be? I should probably also note that I haven't lived in said house for around 4 years now, but the other family still does. I didn't take any investigative action after my first encounter, and to be honest, I really didn't think of the voice again. Kind of forgot. My boyfriend occasionally mentioned the ghost when his stuff got misplaced. Frankly, I just thought it was an excuse for him not being responsible. Recently, my boyfriend moved out to help out family since I am about to move onto campus to start my grad program. So, I am living alone. It's perfectly quiet at all times. The few times I have thought about his ghost, I just laugh to myself because I live in an absolute fucking silence, and surely I would hear some ghostly shenanigans, but I didn't. Well, fuck me, cause the other night I was walking into the bathroom, scene of the crime in my first encounter, and as I flipped on the light, my blood ran fucking cold. For a split second, there was a black silhouette in the mirror. I was not in any position for my own body to be in the mirror. It's a weird angle. The thing I saw was like it was in front of the mirror, and I was outside, reaching in. Where the mirror was, visibly to me, but I was not reflected in it. It was not only there for a second, I audibly gasped and blinked in shock, and it was gone. It's just my hair. It's finally long, I said. But I had all my hair up in a bun with no visible flyaways. And a few strands of hair wouldn't make a head, neck, shoulders, and half a torso. I don't know. It's been a few days and I can't get it out of my head. I don't know what's going on, but like I said, I am moving soon. If there is something here, then I hope it's happy. I will be leaving them soon. If there's any entity, well, I hope it or she finds peace, and preferably not in this building, because it doesn't legally meet the standards for habitable dwelling spaces, as I have recently learned and will be contacting the city, so she can probably do better. So, me and my boyfriend had moved into an apartment. We live in a duplex, so not many neighbors. Our neighbors had told us, though, that the previous tenant told them that it was haunted. When they would go downstairs, they would trip, but it would feel like someone is tripping them, and that someone was watching them when they would shower as well. We haven't had that happen, but have felt a presence when I shower sometimes. This one, me and my boyfriend were by his computer, and it was winter, so it could go cold in the house because it was getting dark out. I went to turn up the heat, which is behind our TV, so you had to go get it to where it was weirdly positioned. When I did that, I quickly saw something in the corner of my eye, and I looked, and there was a black figure of a man standing there, like right behind me. I thought it was a person and thought they were going to hit me. I turned away to shield myself, and I looked back, and it was gone. I have had a friend who can see ghosts and talk to them, and when he came into the house with my other friends, he got scared because that same ghost stands by the door, way to scare us, but we can't see him. He told us that this ghost is a trickster, then said, "There's one down in the basement, and it's an older gentleman, and he likes us because we're not loud. He was tripping the last tenants because they were always loud. He only usually stays downstairs because it's cold and makes him feel like he's not a ghost." I used to live in a pretty good-sized city, but about 2 miles away from the house were a huge wooded area with a river that ran through it. Me and my cousin would spend lots of time in those woods. There was a lot of junk there, a few cars, lots of buckets, and some sheets of metal. We built a clubhouse there using some of the sheets of metal and wood. It was a pretty good closed-off clubhouse, good enough to stop rain and the weather. It was also about a quarter mile into the woods. I remember this day. I went to his house, pretty close by, and we hung out there before he said, "Hey, let's go to the clubhouse." I was playing on his game and said okay, and he said, "I'm gonna go to the store on the way and I'll meet you there." I said, "Cool, just let me finish this game." He got a 15-minute head start before I headed there. When I got there, I noticed it was eerily quiet. I couldn't hear a bird or a car. When I got to the clubhouse, I noticed something knocked over our mailbox. It was just a bucket nailed into a 2x4. I went to pick up the piece of wood when I heard almost like a scratching noise on the metal walls. I tried to listen, and it went so eerily quiet. Like when you hear that ringing in your ear because it's so quiet. I said, "Camilo, you suck at hiding." Then I heard a almost clown-like laughter come from inside. I call him a weirdo and walk over to the car that's about 50 feet to retrieve a stone we use to hit nails into things. That's when I see my cousin walking with a bag from the store and drinking a soda. He said sorry. I ran into someone from school. I run towards him and tell him someone was in the clubhouse. Like dumbass kids, he grabs a stick and I grab a rock, and we open the door to find nobody. It was empty. We only had a mattress and some books and magazines. I never turned my back to it, and I would have noticed or heard someone open the door. We put on. I never researched those woods, and I should have. Unfortunately, those woods were cut down. I'm 20 now, and at this point, this has happened when I was about 9 or 10 years old. I was living with my dad at the time, and recently, over the last 5 years, was dealing with a divorce, and he remarried to my now stepmom with 5 kids. She has a set of twin girls that shared a room in the middle of my house. I slept in the living room, 3-bedroom house with 7 kids and 2 adults, connected to the same hall as my stepsister's room. I was asleep, along with everyone else in the house, and at around 3 or 4 in the morning, my dad kept waking up in the middle of the night and kept hearing my sisters crying down the hall, and he would check on them, and everyone was still sound asleep. I had woken up to him, walking back and forth down the hall, checking on everyone. I stayed awake, unable to go back to sleep. So, oddly, I'm staring up at the ceiling, just waiting to be able to sleep once again, and out of nowhere, I didn't hear my sisters, but I just got a terrible feeling of existential dread. I wanted to cry so bad, but I could not release a single tear. Not a minute later, my dad comes rushing down the hall once again, hearing my sisters cry. Oddly though, I couldn't hear it. I was just being hit with a heavy weight of fear and dread. He immediately wakes everyone up, and then that weight was released, and we slept in his room for the night. I'm not sure what happened, but to this day, if I ever get that feeling, something very bad happens, whether it's something paranormal or a bad life occurrence. This is a collection of scary and weird stuff that has happened in my house. Falling toys. The earliest thing I can remember that really freaked me out about my house was a reoccurring experience of soft toys that I had put away on top of my wardrobe suddenly falling to the floor. I would notice that a toy that had definitely been on top of my wardrobe before I went to bed would be on the floor when I woke up the next morning. Being a very young kid, it did freak me out, but I didn't really understand ghosts or anything, so I just kind of laughed it off, thinking it was the wind or poor placement of the toys. But as this became more common, I became more unsettled. I remember once I heard a soft thud. I turned to see a toy hedgehog now on the floor. I was fed up at this point, and so I picked up the toy and said to the empty air, "If that was you, do it again." Nothing happened, so I brushed it off and tried to go on. I told my younger sister about what had happened and what was happening, and we both laughed about it. I had asked if she had had any similar experiences, but she said no. The last time I can remember a toy falling from my wardrobe was the worst of all. My sister had a friend over for a sleepover, and she had told her friend about the weird experiences. Her friend had asked to see, so they came to my room. All three of us stood near the doorway, and I noticed the hedgehog on the floor again. I called out once again to the empty air. If there is someone here, knock a toy off of the wardrobe. We all waited in silence until suddenly there was a soft thud, and a toy had fallen. I don't remember much of what I was thinking. All I remember was hearing someone scream and running out of my room. A toy hasn't fallen off the wardrobe since. The next thing I remember happening in my house was a collection of small, unsettling things that happened in the middle of the night. I've always had trouble sleeping, so it was not uncommon for me to be awake long into the night when everyone else was asleep. It was during these unsettled nights that I would hear and experience a lot of things I couldn't explain. The most common thing I remember happening was various creaks and sounds of people moving around. It wasn't unusual for my floorboards to creak, but they would only creak when people were walking around on them. But every time I would check to see if anyone was up and moving, they'd all still be fast asleep, and my sister's door would still be closed. There were so many occurrences of my hearing the sounds of scratching at my door if it was closed. This wasn't something that worried me, as we had always owned cats. So I would just go and open the door to let them in. However, on multiple occasions, I opened the door to an empty corridor with no cats even upstairs. That never sat right with me. The most disturbing and unexplainable thing that happened in the night was something I'll never forget. It had been a completely normal night. I had fallen asleep moderately easily, but a few hours later, I woke back up and couldn't get back to sleep. I was frustrated, but so young that I didn't have a phone to keep me entertained. So I was sat doing nothing until I could fall back asleep. However, before I could even get tired, a loud crash sounded through my room. I looked up frantically to see a small yellow ball bouncing on my floor, like it had just been thrown into my room. I was terrified. I picked up the ball and ran into the corridor, expecting to see maybe my sister or my mom, but the house was silent. My parents were fast asleep, and my sister's door was closed. For context, my sister always closes her door at night, and we always know when the door opens because her door has always been unbearably loud when opening. It creaks and floods the entire house with noise, so I knew immediately that she had not left her room that night. Another common occurrence in my house that still happens to this day is doors opening and closing without any wind or human influence. The most notable instance of this was one day where I was washing my hands and suddenly the bathroom door swung closed. I looked up in panic and watched as the door began to swing open and closed. I shouted out to see if anyone was on the landing, but my family were all downstairs. I cautiously turned around and called out for whatever there was to prove itself by closing the door. After a few seconds pause, the door slammed shut and I screamed, quickly opening the door and running out of the bathroom. Once I had calmed down, I went back to the bathroom, thinking It might have just been the wind, but to my horror, the window was closed tight. For Christmas, one year, I asked for a Ouija board. I was a weird kid. I used the board a few times with family in locations other than my own house. I'd never been confident enough to use it in my own home. Knowing the already concerning experiences I had over the years, I was too scared to risk communicating with whatever may be living in the house. But one night, I decided that I felt brave enough to use the board in my house. It was around 2 a.m. I had got the board out, ready, and opened it. Using the safest methods I knew, I sat with my fingers resting on the planchette for a few minutes. I was too scared to ask anything. It felt like all of my courage from moments ago had vanished into thin air. I sat in tense silence for a few minutes before finally asking a question. "Is anyone there who would like to communicate?" I asked quietly, not wanting to wake the others in my house. Almost instantaneously, the planchette slid across the board. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I hadn't expected a response, especially not one this quickly. I tried to quell my building panic as the planchette flew across the board and sat firmly on yes. I sucked in a sharp breath and tried to think of what to ask next. "What's your name?" I asked, more cautiously. No response. "How old are you?" Still, nothing. I asked a few more questions, still to no avail. I had got one explicit response, and then nothing more, not even a shift. The planchette sat completely motionless on yes. Feeling defeated, I shut down the board. However, I couldn't leave it just like that. I had an uneasy feeling brewing in my stomach. I sat and contemplated what to do for a while before deciding to reopen the board and try again. I repeated the opening process and got ready to ask the questions again, this time with more determination. "Is anyone there who would like to communicate?" I asked. Once again, the planchette flew to yes, this time with more force. I had to swallow back a yelp at the action. I repeated the same questions from the previous session, and still, I received no response apart from the first one. My blood ran cold. I felt as if there was a looming presence in the room, watching my every move. But I couldn't see anyone. I closed the board frantically and hid it behind my bed. The feeling of pure terror didn't leave. I didn't fall asleep that night. I've never used that board in my room since. Sometimes, when I see it in the corner of my eye, I can still feel that terrifying presence looming over my shoulder. I need help. I understand this might not be well received, but I'm desperate. I don't know where to go with this or really where to start, because it's been going on my whole life. So I guess I'll just start at the beginning. The first memories I have of a young child are of dark figures, horrible nightmares, and waking up begging God for help to make them stop. And they did, for a while. It took 6 years and moving into a new house for it to start again. I was 12 or 13 at the time. At first, it started out with me feeling uneasy, like someone was watching me, like something was barely there. But as time moved on, it went back to the same way it was before. Me seeing shadows, night terrors, waking up unable to move with something watching me. The only thing that ended up delaying it and making it stop for a bit was to move my furniture around and completely rearrange my room, but then it stopped working. I couldn't sleep. I would stay awake for days trying to make it stop, but it wouldn't. I eventually begged my parents to move me into the room next to it because of how sinister everything felt. It was tainted. I couldn't exist in the room without feeling heavy and like I hadn't showered in months. Fast forward about 4-5 months, everything was fine. Until I had one sleep paralysis that changed everything. I woke up unable to move as normal, and I was just thinking, well, here we go again. But I remember my mind going blank from fear. It wasn't the normal shadows that I had seen. Whatever it was bothering me, had a form. It had a long, pointy tongue with the neck bent at an unnatural angle and its eyes bulging out of its head. I watched it move towards me, bending down slowly till it crawled on top of me and slithered its tongue down my throat. And as fast as it appeared, it was gone. I sat there for the rest of the night, unable to move. I couldn't sleep, and all I remember was finally being able to move. I moved to the last empty bedroom across the house. It stopped the sleep paralysis, but the night terrors were still there. You think this is where it ends, but not quite. Even with my night terrors, I still woke up without feeling like my energy has been drained. That's a key part for later. I was able to stay in that room until I was 18. I enlisted in the Marines and was shipped off. I had the same pattern follow me, except I wasn't able to delay anything. I wasn't able to move the furniture, so I just let it happen. I was finally stationed in North Carolina, where I reside now after being retired. When I got my new barracks room is when it went downhill, and it started getting physical. Lights would go on and off. When it was just me, doors would open. Something would shake me awake at night. This never happened with my roommate. Anyone I told thought I was utterly crazy. Fast forward, I got married and moved out of the barracks. Our first apartment, 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom, but somehow still enough room for that thing. Flies, they were everywhere. Traps would be set, and a few days later they would be full. Spring, summer, fall, winter. Flies. But it's normal, right? A cheap apartment off base, with the landlord special, the physical activity stopped. And here we are today. We moved on base and everything seemed normal up until a week ago. Something outside my back porch was shaking my hanging lights. It's a screened-in porch and there's no way something had gotten into the porch for it to do that. I messed up. I barely opened the door, but before it even opened, my husband pressed it shut, hard, and locked it. Keep in mind, I have a rosary on that door. It hangs at a point to where it rests on the lights, yet it wasn't shaking. What's happening now is my fault. I let it back in. My night terrors are back. My husband tells me he hears growling at night, footsteps up to the side of the bed when I wasn't in the room. I go upstairs to see closet doors open. My dog growls at things he cannot see. My cat refuses to be with me during the day unless I seek her out, and when I do, she stares behind me. Things go missing and lights flicker, creaking noises as if someone's upstairs. Random banging, random sickness when I never leave the house. I can handle that, but I cannot handle the toll it's taking on me. I wake up exhausted like I haven't slept in days. I feel like my energy is drained. I suffered 22 years of this, It's been with me my entire life. I've used sage. I've prayed. I've used holy water. It won't go away. I just need help, advice, anything. I don't care if it goes away at this point. I just want it to lessen. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If your story was told, I'm glad I'm the one who could tell it. I appreciate all of the love and support. I hope you enjoyed today's stories as much as I did reading them.